it sounds pretty good. I hate when shit doesn't work. Isn't that annoying?
Oh my god, are you kidding me? I'm such a boomer when it comes to technology.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm trying to like expand into doing like Twitch and different stuff, and I don't know how any of that shit works. It's
oh my god, forget it. Even for me, what I do with YouTube, like all I know how to do is the shit I know how to do. Ask me anything, even like 2% outside of what I know, and I'm like, I have no clue.
Can't help you. Cannot help you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Are you in the West Coast?
No. I live in New York.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know if you were like getting up at 6 or whatever time it is there to help me. But I appreciate you taking the time. It was really cool.
No, my pleasure, man. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. Great. Well, hold on just one second. Let me call out my notes here. Well, yeah, Kyle Kulinski. I'm really happy you're able to join the program today. It's a pleasure to have you on. Have you come on? How's it going? How's it going down there?
It's going really well. I'm really happy to talk to you. You've been making me laugh on Twitter for a very long time. And yeah, pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, we try. We got to have a laugh out there. Sometimes you have to laugh at the insanity out there, don't you?
I mean, your character, you already know this, but your character that you play, like the Resistance character, it's literally one of the funniest things I've ever seen. You play it so well. Like like the way too plugged in Gen X or boomer liberal who's like, trying to own Trump, and you say stuff like, he's orange.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of that, man. I wish you'd release one of those every day.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to parlay it into a Colbert writing gig, and nothing's materialized so far. Maybe eventually
Dude,
someone will take notice.
It would totally take off. I know I'm not the only one who sees that and just laughs so hard. The funniest one is when like there's a small percentage of people who don't know that you're joking.
Yeah.
And like they think it's serious, and I'm like, how do you not get that?
Well, because that whole character, it's beyond parody, because there are really legitimately people like that talk like that and think that that's kind of what politics is, and thinks that that's how you beat Trump is by talking about his hand size and his Trump and then all that stuff. People still believe that for some reason.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's weird because it really is kind of like a generational thing. I feel like it's older liberals who they view their politics through the lens of just, I am a Democrat, Republicans bad, and let's just everything is through that prism, but there's no like thought about policy or class or serious issues. It's just like
well, ironically, when it comes down to policy, their only idea is that we have to work with Republicans on everything. That's our only. So I hate the Republicans are bad. They're bad. They're bad, and we have to resist them. But also, when we're in power, the only way we can ever do anything is by making sure that our agenda is palatable enough for like the fucking weirdos in the Republican Party. That's the only way we can get anything done.
Exactly, with like Wall Street deregulation and more war. They think this is bipartisan, and bipartisanship is good by definition, unless it's with Trump, in which case we're just going to, everything Trump does is bad. Even if Trump happens to stumble on something that's good, like pulling out of TPP, like the next day you'd see 1,000, resistance idiots like, this was so important because we had to like counter the influence of China around the world.
Yeah. Well, no, but even then, they still can't find them. Like, they're saying Trump is the worst. He's the worst threat to our democracy. He's Russian. He's Putin's boyfriend, or whatever they say about him. And then it's like, do you need an extra 150 billion for the defense budget? How about we can bump that up even if you want. Like, what do you need us to work with you on here? It's mixed
so
signals.
True. And they did that with NSA spying too. Like they like increased his spying powers and approved more spying powers for him, and it's great. You guys were literally just telling us last week that he's a Manchurian candidate doing Putin's bidding, and now you're like, oh, by the way, you can spy on all of us and then some.
Well, because that's the noble men and women in the intelligence community, so they're just empowering them. We have to make sure they have all the resources they need so they can make sure that Trump, the orange small hand man is not doing too much a disinformatia or whatever.
It's crazy how they really did flip. They switched on a dime too, because I remember when I was younger and I was just getting into politics, there actually was, after so many Democrats voted for the Iraq War, like 2 or 3 years in, there did become like pretty strong resistance to it on the Democratic side, and like there was this healthy skepticism of the intelligence communities. But then now it's like, they just totally forgot that, and now they're embracing, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, they embrace them completely, and they pretend like there is no, troubled history there of them doing like everything wrong every step of the way, whether it's spying on Martin Luther King and telling him to kill himself, whether it's lying us into the Iraq War. Now, because they're like nominally anti-Trump, they're like, oh, well, these guys are heroes, and how dare they? I remember when they were trying to say that the deep state isn't a real thing. They were arguing that like a year ago, like what a conspiracy. Anything they, that doesn't mesh with their politics, they immediately call it a conspiracy theory, even if it's like super obvious.
Yeah. Well, this was a big thing about like when Obama was elected. I mean, Obama ran opposing the Iraq War and talking about ending the wars, and a lot of people believed that and said, yeah, this is great. And then that was the odd thing for me, I think, as kind of an outside observer following that, because you really realized the limits of what liberalism could offer, because then as soon as he got into power, all of a sudden it's like their opposition to like regime change and spying and all that kind of went away, because like now we're doing it, so it's good. We're not doing the Iraq War. We're not invading these other countries. We're just taking out people with flying robots and just doing warrantless assassinations and overthrowing governments in different ways. And now that's okay. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, what the fuck? Like, I thought all you people were opposed to this stuff. It turns out you were opposed to a Republican doing it. But as soon as a guy has a D next to his name and he's drastically expanding all this stuff, the national security establishment and the foreign policy establishment, then that's good. And I was really thinking, like, this is not the ideology for me here.
Exactly. And the Democrats, the way they rationalize that is they say, oh, no, we're different because we're doing, quote, soft power, unquote. Yeah. So it's like, these barbarians on the right, Lindsey Graham and, these neocons, like, all they want to do is ground invade all of these countries. And that's a step too far. But us, we have no problem, like, flying these machines of death and blowing up wedding processions, but only using air power and some, just a handful of, quote, boots on the ground that are advisors for troops in the region. But it's not like we're doing an all-out ground invasion. So basically, the Overton window, the spectrum is like, you can be in favor of imperialism and using air power and using advisors, or you could be in favor of like all-out ground invasions of 912 countries. So, so
which one? That's a great choice.
Where do you fall there?
Yeah, nice democracy you have going there. Yeah, we're not going to invade these countries. We're just going to like fund and arm jihadist militias to overthrow the governments we don't like. Surely that's not going to end badly for anyone. It's a tried, tested, and true strategy. Great stuff.
Yeah, and then the other thing they do is they talk about, if you go back and watch like clips of Obama when he was running, he's very careful to describe the Iraq War as a, quote, stupid war. It's a dumb war.
Yeah, we're doing the smart wars now.
Exactly. So it's always like, you could never say, it's not acceptable in U.S. discourse to say, like, okay, this is immoral, this is unethical, this is illegal, this is a war crime, we have agency and we did it on purpose and there need to be consequences. You're not allowed to say that. It has to be, like, the empire is just fumbling around and happened to like trip and fall into Iraq and sorry, this was a dumb war. And then you're right that Obama always said on the campaign trail, well, Afghanistan was the smart war and Iraq was the dumb war, and so we need to do none of the dumb wars and do the smart wars instead. And that just shows you how hollow the ideology is, that it's like, we can effectively manage the empire better than the other side, so vote for us.
Yeah. And then it was an interesting situation a couple weeks ago when Trump took out Soleimani with that it was a drone assassination, and you had liberals saying, wow, this is outrageous. How can you do this? How can you use this power like this? And it's like, well, yeah, of course he's like, you guys set the precedent that this is like what this is okay to do. And a lot of people on the left at that time were saying, I don't think the president should be doing like warrantless drone assassinations. I think it's bad. And there was liberals saying like, hey, you're just helping Republicans, like, stop it. And now that there's like this like lunatic game show host doing the same thing, they're complaining about it, but it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have set that precedent and made that like a legitimate strategy that then anyone can then use and expand on.
Yep, that's right. And Glenn Greenwald was famously screaming about that at the top of his lungs during the Obama administration, and they were all like, just like you said, they're like, hey man, shut up, like, you're helping the Republicans by saying this. And his whole point was like, you're setting a precedent that obviously somebody's going to come in down the road that you don't agree with, who's going to do this stuff, and then all of a sudden you're going to be outraged. Although, to be fair, some people have been consistent. And by that I mean Neera Tanden has been consistently wrong on this. She apparently wasn't very upset about the Soleimani killing. Like, and I love how they just switched the conversation. When we violate international law and do a war crime and an assassination but from a machine of death in a sovereign country, and then they're like, "Are you saying he wasn't a bad guy?" They just changed the
never heard that
conversation to like, oh wait, I didn't know that was the standard. I didn't know that the standard was, if somebody's a bad guy, we're allowed to kill them. Imagine like
there's quite a lot of bad guys in America, in the American government. There's plenty of bad guys there.
Somebody robs a convenience store and then you hear like a freaking predator drone over their head and they blow them up and then, hey,
this is the future liberals want.
Are you saying he wasn't a bad guy?
Yeah. No, but that's why, like, with Glenn Greenwald specifically, like, I don't always agree with every single thing Glenn says, or does, but I will always have that appreciation for him because of, I think the kind of courage that it took to be that kind of one of the only voices in mainstream politics and media kind of making this argument during the Obama years because no one else was really doing it. Liberals kind of abdicated the responsibility of holding him accountable for that stuff. So, I always was really drawn to Glenn's work for that exact reason. And even though I don't agree with every single thing he says or does, but I always think he deserves support and respect for the clarity that he's shown on that. And now you have liberals like celebrating the fact that he's being persecuted and possibly imprisoned for exposing corruption and fascism in Brazil.
Yeah, the thing that's great about Glenn is that he just wanders into minefields. Like he'll, with his takes, with the way he acts, with the stuff he does, he'll just like casually wander into a minefield and just doesn't care about the consequences. And like, yeah, when you're like a ruthlessly principled person, it's hard to have friends because he's going to do something along the line that pisses everybody off. So, but that's a character trait that's admirable, even though I agree with you. I don't agree with him on everything. Famously, he actually believes that, the ACLU position on money in politics is the correct position, namely that, Citizens United was decided correctly and that money does equal free speech. Like he thinks that reading of the First Amendment is a fair reading of the First Amendment. And I totally disagree with him on that. But again, like he's one of those people where he came to that position because he actually believes it. And so I can't dislike him, even though I have some like pretty strong fundamental core disagreements with him. But yeah, he's a guy who I'll always have a soft spot for that reason.
Yeah. Okay, well, man, we kind of got way off track here right off the beginning, but this is good stuff, though. But the main thing that, like, I thought we should get into today is the fact that, this goddamn primary, I think it's been going on for like a year, and it's just now actually starting. We're 1 week away from, or now less, from the Iowa caucuses. Bernie Sanders absolutely surging in Iowa in multiple polls and New Hampshire. And the thing I've been kind of waiting for is like, okay, as more and more we're seeing like in the media, more and more people like waking up to the fact that like, oh shit, like this might actually happen. Bernie might actually win. And I've been waiting for the big onslaught to begin. And I really thought like Monday morning, okay, this is the week. It's 1 week to go. They've seen the polls. They know what's happening. Here's when the real like onslaught, the real shit is going to start with the media. And it's Bernie Bros. And that's all. There was a New York Times Bernie Bro story. I think there was 3 separate Bernie Bro focused pieces in different like mainstream media outlets yesterday. And I'm just like stunned. I'm really like, is this all you guys have? Honestly, like this is really embarrassing for you that this is, you've got your last chance to make a last stand here against this guy that you really are against and don't want. And this is the best you can do. Like this is so tired and boring. No one's even buying it anymore. And it's like, are you surprised by how shitty this like rat fucking operation has been so far?
I am, because, for all the talk about like smoke-filled back rooms and they're plotting and they're conspiring and all that stuff, I feel like a lot of people forget to factor in that these are complete and utter idiots, man. Like these are the same people. They really are. Like these are the exact same people who did the Pied Piper strategy against Donald Trump.
Yes.
Because they thought like, oh, let's bolster this guy and talk about how, he's the one that we're really afraid of because we feel like there's no way Hillary can lose to Trump.
He's too unelectable. He's like unelectable.
Exactly. So their political analysis is just that of a child. Like everything they believe, everything they do is just based off of like lazy textbook thinking of how things are supposed to go in a world that's permanently stuck in 1992. Like And so, but they don't realize that this new political era, throw out the goddamn rule book. It's wrong. The things that they all thought were rules are not rules. As soon as, with Donald Trump winning, that should have been readily apparent to everybody. Even the fact that it came down to the last two were Donald Trump and Ted frickin' Cruz. That didn't send you a message that you're in a different political time. I mean, we're talking about Jeb Bush. In 1992, perhaps he would have been the last one standing because it was just such a different time. But in the year 2016, he was such an abysmal failure. It was laughable. It was comical.
Rubio as well. They really thought Rubio was going to be the guy to come in there, and it just was just pathetic. Absolutely
terrible.
Dude,
they literally went down a list throughout the whole. First they thought it's going to be Jeb, let's pump up Jeb, and then obviously he folded super quickly, and then they went to Rubio and they thought, well, maybe Rubio, and this is the big money interest, this is who they were backing, and then he obviously didn't do well, and then they even were like, Kasich? And homeboy was at 2% in the polls, and they were trying to make him a thing, and obviously that didn't work. My favorite was when I think Kasich got second place in one of the early contests, and he was he did a speech as if he won, and I was like, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life.
This is how I win.
You have to stop. And then eventually they said, we'll even take Cruz over Trump. And then, of course, they didn't get Cruz either. So, yeah, and this is what I've said for so long. The establishment on the Democratic side and the establishment on the Republican side, yes, they're evil. Yes, they try to rig stuff, all that, but they're also just massive, massive idiots. So we should be thankful that this is who we're up against. Did you see that Jonathan Chait article?
Yeah, I wanted to get into that next, yeah.
Look at all they have is did you know that this guy is a socialist and supports big government and he's unelectable? That's all they have. It's the saddest thing ever. And that's why, like you said, they're attacking, oh my God, they're Bernie bros out there. They're people who are mean. I love when they compare Bernie supporters to Trump supporters because number one, substantively, we totally disagree. But number two, even if I accept that, okay, are you saying that we're about to win? Because Trump kind of rode that internet momentum to the White House.
Yes. Well, that's it. That's he's got this this invincible online army that just destroys all his opponents. But no, we don't want this guy unleashed in the general. We don't want the guy that has the super dedicated young supporters winning the meme war. They're no, we can't have this guy. He might then what's going to happen? They
were saying that the snake emojis that were being tweeted to Elizabeth Warren, they described that as bullying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. What the fuck?
Yeah, we're bullying a senator and presidential candidate with emojis.
You know what? They're so used to not having a democratized public forum that for all these years they would write their utter nonsense and control the narrative and nobody could respond. But now we live in the internet era and we have social media, and so people can see their nonsense and then laugh at it and mock them and call them out. And so now all these idiots are convinced this is the biggest scandal in the country. The biggest scandal in the country is that my mentions are full of people telling me I'm a piece of shit and I'm an idiot.
Yeah, they're sending me a picture with a pig with poop on its testicles. And this is
one of my favorites.
Yeah, this is a crisis. No, but it really is. It's incredible how much these people focus on Twitter. And they kind of simultaneously say that it doesn't matter and it's not real life. But if you look at the Kamala Harris campaign, for example, they really think that the Kamala Harris is a cop Twitter meme is what destroyed her campaign. They really believe that. And you have Hillary talking about the Bernie bros and talking about this is why I didn't beat Trump was because Bernie was so mean to me in the primary that the online Bernie bros then did memes against me that made me lose. And the Pete Buttigieg people and the bread pricing thing, they fixate on Twitter, this kind of consultant class. And it's really kind of amazing because by doing that, they give people power that they wouldn't necessarily have.
That's so true. And I think that argument is so weak because it's always Hillary was oh my God, Bernie said mean things about me. And it's well, so why didn't you not do the things that he's accurately saying you did? It's a weird way to try to flip the responsibility. Okay, sure, I did all these things, but how dare you point it out?
Yeah.
You shouldn't have done the things. That's the problem. The problem is not that people are pointing it out. Truth is always a defense.
Yeah, well, and that's the kind of odd thing about this primary, too, right? Is that, like, hey, we can't, we're on the same team here. We can't get too mean and nasty. We can't do things like, bringing up my record of things that I have done in my career. But it's like, this fake rule you're talking about, that doesn't exist in the general election, that you have to win the presidency, where this like, pretend rule about not bringing up these things because it's too mean is not going to apply. So, if it's fucking Biden is the nominee, this, like, rule about not bringing up his, like, obviously corrupt fail son and, like, his decades long career of trying to slash benefits and throw black people in prison. It's not like there's going to be, like, a rule in the general that Trump is not going to seize on all these things and make the entire election about that.
Exactly, man. That's completely true. And, like, this is their way of crying uncle. This is the centrists' way of saying, okay, I literally have no good response to what you're saying, so I'm just going to insist that the entire conversation is illegitimate. That's what they're doing. Like, oh, you're bringing up accurate criticisms against me? Well, I have zero response to that. So wait a second, all this is out of bounds, and let's believe in unity. And then the hilarious thing is, in the next breath, they'll launch, like, vicious attacks against Bernie and against his supporters, while one side of their mouth they're saying unity, the other side they're like, and Bernie Sanders is completely unelectable and nobody should ever support him, and, he's basically like Maduro and all this shit.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that Chait article. There was one element of that I did want to get you to weigh in on, though, which is basically using the midterm elections as an example of, like, how, even though Hillary lost, in the midterms, none of these kind of left-leaning, more like democratic socialist candidates like Richard Ojeda, or some of these different candidates, none of them won. Our revolution didn't get a win, and Justice Democrats and brand new Congress. So that's an example of how, even though Hillary lost, Bernie is going to lose even more. Like, do you think there's anything there at all in that argument that the midterm?
Zero truth in that. And in fact, that's massively cherry-picked and misconstrued and twisted in a zillion ways. I know, as a co-founder of Justice Democrats, now we went from having the group was literally just founded after the 2016 election. Like, it literally just was born very, very recently. And now there are 13 Justice Democrats in Washington, D.C. in elected positions. There were some of them that were already there, like Ro Khanna, for example, and Pramila Jayapal and Raul Grijalva. So, like, some of them were already there and they were incumbents and they had the power of incumbency. But yeah, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the most powerful freshman congressperson in the history of the United States of America, who's the number one fundraiser, particularly because she has a grassroots army and because she raises in small dollar donations. So that whole notion of, like, I mean, come on, man, you guys, these lefties got wiped out. It's just fundamentally not true. And also, another fact is there were, like, literally hundreds of DSA members who got elected at the state and local level.
Yeah.
So notice what they do here, man. They rigidly define the confines of the debate, right? And then they say, well, within this narrow confine that I laid out in this world, then the centrists did better. And it's like they dismiss all the evidence to the contrary. For Christ's sake, we had no money. None. Yeah. We don't, as a matter of principle, we don't take corporate PAC money. We don't take billionaire money. All we do is raise in small dollar donations. That's all we do. A method that people have screamed has been not viable for the longest time. Well, we're a group that did it out of nowhere, and we already have 13 politicians in Washington, D.C. We won, I believe the number is 42% of our primaries. Like, what they're saying is just fundamentally not true. And, you try, imagine, like, with the massive money disadvantage that we had, we almost won half of our primaries? Are you kidding me? Yeah. That's insanely successful. Like, the standard they set up, what did they expect? We were going to, every single race we were running, we were going to win after just creating the group in 2016 and having no frickin' money?
Yeah.
Like, what a ridiculous standard these people are using. So that's one of the ones that gets under my skin the most, is that, and then here's actually an even more important point. So in that election, they had on the ballots, they had, direct ballot initiatives at many state levels. Over like 90% of the left-wing positions on those issues won. Virtually every single time you put marijuana on the ballot, the pro-marijuana position wins. When you put the minimum wage on the ballot, as some states did, the minimum wage ends up being increased. Like, so how these people get away saying with a straight face that, like, oh, these left ideas aren't popular and these left candidates aren't popular, you have to totally twist yourself into an intellectual pretzel and narrowly focus on only the evidence that you think proves your case in order to make that argument. And I happen to know, since I co-founded the group and I was well aware, with the election, what was going on, I happen to know that they're just bullshitting. And like the sad thing is, I see so many people on the left who like fall into the trap of like agreeing with that. And it's like, you guys just don't know what the hell you're talking about. You just don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's like, I saw Dave Weigel tweet about that, and I like Dave, but I'm like,
yeah,
have you never heard the counter argument? Like, these people are just bullshitting you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you mentioned like ballot stuff. Like Florida was an example of that, where Gillum lost, but they passed a bunch of like super progressive ballot initiatives, like restoring voting rights for felons and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Gillum outperformed like the centrist Democrats massively, even though he lost. Yeah. Like, see, this is what I mean. They take all the evidence that's contrary and they just leave it out. They omit it. Even the Richard Ojeda example, he way outperformed the polls. Like, a Democrat is not supposed to get anywhere near winning there. And he came within, like, what, 10, 15 points, something like that? Like, I remember looking at the numbers afterwards and going, oh, my God. Like, he was supposed to lose by, like, 45 points.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing that I've been saying, like, because, I've been doing this show for, like, 18 months or so, and kind of covering this, like, ongoing progressive takeover of the Democratic Party establishment, right? And trying to kind of, like, supplant that. And that's the thing, is that, like, I think people would rather these kind of candidates win every single race. And it's very easy to get, like, discouraged when you get invested in someone and then that doesn't end up working out. But what I've been kind of saying also is that it's going to be like a slow, ongoing process. They're not going to win every single time, but you're making headway, obviously, when you see people like AOC and Ilhan Omar and these different kind of candidates become so prominent and take up so much space. And you just know that in the next election, then there's going to be 3 or 4 more of those candidates. And then there's going to be 5, there's more every time. And it's going to be like an ongoing thing. And like, it was never realistic, even though as much as we would like for this to just be like a instant thing where everyone just kind of, runs to the left and kind of kicks out this very entrenched establishment on both sides. It's not an easy task. And like, it's progressing pretty nicely if you really look at it in the long view like that.
That's true, yeah. And we have no choice but to embrace electoral politics. And too many of us on the left, it's too easy to tap out and just like say, I'm not going to get involved in this because the whole process is so dirty. And it's like, well, yeah, the thing that you're citing as a reason to not get involved is actually the biggest reason to get involved. It's so dirty and it's so terrible and it's so like evil and corrupt and rotten that like we have no choice but to get involved to try to fix it. And we have to believe in electoral politics, and we have to try our best to, fix the country and help people and move everything in the right direction. If we check out, here's what I guarantee you, the ghouls on the right are never checking out of electoral politics. No. It's not even a question for them. They just view it as a civic duty, like this is what I have to do. So like, why would
there's a big career, like there's a viable career path if anyone that wants to get involved with that, less so for like progressive people and people on the left.
But we're changing that, and I hope that people are starting to realize like, no, we can really do this. I mean, AOC got elected, man. She beat one of the leader Democrats in the country. Like, that dude was in line at some point to be the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
So
even though they've tried to retcon that and say like, oh, it wasn't actually that big of a deal and not that many people voted and he wasn't even trying. So
yeah, exactly. That's the Chait argument, is like, it doesn't count. It never counts when a progressive does something amazing.
Yeah.
All of our wins don't count for a variety of reasons. My favorite one is like, oh, the demographics of that place made it so that she was going to win. Like, wow, this is the level that they go to in order to just dismiss it. She had like a 10-1 or 20-1 money disadvantage, and she ended up winning. So, like, again, it never counts. Let me just give one more example of how, there's definitely hope here. You had 2 primaries going on, elections going on next to each other for the Senate. One in Ohio and one in Indiana. Joe Donnelly in Indiana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Joe Donnelly famously ran as far right as a Democrat has ever run. He ran ads embracing Ronald Reagan. He ran ads saying he supports the wall, and he hates Medicare for all. And then Sherrod Brown next door, he ran a pretty unapologetically left campaign. And, his whole thing in Ohio is, I'm going to fight the outsourcing. I'm going to make sure to keep your jobs here and keep your wages high. I'm a union guy. And Joe Donnelly got obliterated and Sherrod Brown got reelected. So this is exactly what we're talking about. And funny enough, it's in the exact region of the country that we need in order to win this general election in 2020. Because no matter all the yelping and screaming and moaning that everybody does, bottom line is, in order to win the election, the general election, you have to win the Rust Belt. And it just so happens that this is the area of the country where Bernie Sanders is the most popular. Yeah. The area where he's least likely to lose to Donald Trump. So, funny enough, even if you accept the electability arguments that the corporate Democrats make, we beat them on their own grounds because the most electable by far is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and that's the big flaw in Chait's argument as well, talking about the midterms, is that like there's a difference between this midterm, which historically like not as many people participate in, and you don't have a figure like Bernie Sanders running, who's one of the most popular politicians in the country, a guy who's built this massive grassroots network, who has like these massive reach on social media and this huge base of support. I mean, the fact that he's going to be running kind of invalidates all that. So it's not like you can point to like Richard Ojeda as an example of why Bernie Sanders would lose even worse to Donald Trump, because I mean you can't really compare those two guys together. One guy has built a massive organization to complete this exact task. And another guy was like an upstart dude who like outperformed the polls, but had no kind of national recognition or no kind of a big groundswell of public support like that.
Yeah, and the other thing that drives me crazy is they don't like. It doesn't even occur to them that hey, maybe some people involved in this whole politics thing, maybe they have principles. So in other words, maybe you run on what you believe in. Try to bring about the change that you want in this country, and the immediate results might not be there, but you're not doing this simply to try to strategize and then you get in power so you can pull the levers of power. Maybe the end goal is not just that pursuit of power and quote unquote winning. Maybe we're actually in this for bigger reasons. Maybe the whole idea is to be principled and to say, like, we're not people on the left, they're not gonna sway off of Medicare for all because they believe as a matter of principle that we can catch up to the rest of the developed world and everybody should have healthcare that's free at the point of service.
And some of them fucking just need it. Like that's their only option. Like they're fighting for it because they it will change their lives permanently.
And no amount of browbeating about strategy is going to get these people to go, you know what, you got a point there. Because honestly, it's akin to imagine somebody getting involved in politics in like in 1959 with the goal of ending segregation. If you had a bunch of idiots at the time like Chait saying like, well, maybe I agree with you on the go, but now's not the right time and we need to be strategic about how to get in power and we need to make sure that maybe we make some concessions and maybe only half desegregate places. You would look at that guy and be like, you're a fucking unprincipled dipshit. Like, you're a piece of shit, man. Like, that's what you are. So maybe getting involved in politics, there are people involved in politics who have principled beliefs, and even if the public isn't where they are at this point in time, we will get them to that point because we believe in what we're saying and we have a vision and we're selling that vision. And maybe you don't agree with me now, maybe you don't agree with me in 5 years, but maybe 8 years from now you go, you know what, I actually think that was correct all along, whether it's ending the wars or doing a Green New Deal or a living wage or whatever it may be. So that's the other thing that drives me crazy is that guys like Chait, it's not like politics don't have real world consequences to a guy like that. He's massively wealthy. He's got his cushy job, even though he's absolutely terrible at it. Like, politics does not have those same real-world consequences where it's like, hey, man, if we don't have Medicare for all, maybe he's going to go bankrupt as a result of medical bills. It's not going to happen to him. So to him, it's not real. So That's the other thing that drives me crazy is that they have these, like, really superficial arguments about politics, and it's like, you guys are up your own ass, and you don't understand what normal people are going through.
Yeah, and especially if we're talking about healthcare, like if healthcare is the thing that you're most passionate about, like we've seen the liberal technocrat approach, right? That was Obamacare. That was the strategy that they employed, that they said was the only way we can ever possibly make anything better is by making these tiny little tweaks to the current system and making sure it stays in place. And yeah, I think probably many people were helped in some ways by that, by the tweaks they made to make it like slightly less miserable for people. But like most of the young people I know, you have to buy health insurance in America, got fucked by Obamacare and just have to pay these massively high premiums for plans that they don't need or use or that don't actually cover them when they get sick. And this is the political fight just to get that. I mean, if you're looking back on that now and you're thinking about what your strategy wants to be in order to win real healthcare reform, it's like, well, we can't have another 15 years of slightly turning the cruelty knob down on this like brutal system. Like we've seen where that approach gets us. And it was an electoral loser as well, because, Republicans just immediately turned people against it, and had plenty of real things they could point out to people that were, not good about it. And it became a huge, like, albatross around the Democratic Party's neck for, like, almost the entire Obama administration. So it's kind of the same principle. We've seen where that approach gets us, and there's people now that lived through that era and just reject that approach fundamentally and just be like, well, no, we know what that's about. We know what the strategy is. We know what the results are going to be. We want to do something different. And people like Chait just don't seem to quite grasp that.
And they also don't get that, like, the corrupting influence of big money is how we've gotten to this point where the Democrats will not unapologetically stand up for Medicare for all and ending the wars, because they have to worry about the for-profit health insurance companies and how much money they're giving to them, and Big Pharma and how much they getting campaign contributions, and the military industrial complex and Raytheon and Boeing and Honeywell and all these companies that have, like, Lockheed Martin. They have jobs in every state in the country. So there's these other concerns that shouldn't be concerns that have watered down the Democratic position and the Democratic Party. And it's like, no wonder why Bernie Sanders is catching on and Bernie Sanders is appealing. He's one of, like, a grand total of 5 principled people in Washington, D.C. who actually has beliefs and have been arguing with them and tells the big money donors to piss off. So it's funny that they don't, like, that analysis to them is, they think I'm from Neptune if I say something like that to them. They're like, what? Like, what are you saying? And it's like, yes, the entire Democratic Party, the Republican Party is, the establishment of the Republican Party is too far gone. They believe in hideous things across the board. But, like, the Democratic Party, they don't even have what used to be considered obvious Democratic positions because of that corrupting influence of big money. And so people can sniff out how, like, the whole system is broken. That's why when, you elect Congress, you come back a month later and you do an opinion poll and they have like a 20% favorability rating. Like, how the hell is it possible that you just elect these people and then you have a 20% approval rating? And the answer is very simple, because everybody knows they're always voting for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you talked about, like, people on the left engaging with electoral politics. And I think that's the big thing about Sanders as well, is that I don't think anyone should have any illusions that, like when you talk about the United States, and this is true everywhere, but the United States especially, that to win, like, real reform, whether it's healthcare or, like, climate justice or racial justice or anything, that's like, that really needs to take place in the street and in social movements. But I mean, that's not going to really work if there's a shitty Democrat in the office, or if there's a Republican that's completely opposed to that kind of stuff in the office. But if you have Bernie in office to, like, nurture these social movements and encourage them and harness them, then you can actually possibly change some stuff. Because, you know what I mean? It's like, it has to go hand in hand. Nothing's going to happen with just through voting and just going home after that and being like, well, I've done my civic duty. Now I'm just going to wait around for people to, like, change stuff. It has to go hand in hand with getting an administration in there that's going to be sympathetic to social movements, and then going out in the street and building huge social movements to try and win some of this actual change.
Yeah, you just stumbled on my exact theory of change. That's exactly what my theory of change is. I believe in an outside in. I think the people who want to totally cede the ground on electoral politics and have nothing to do with it, I think they're totally wrong. And I think the people who only want to be involved in electoral politics and ignore the outside game and the social movements, I think that they're equally wrong. So you need both. You absolutely need both. You need an ally in the White House we don't have to question whether or not he's on our side. We know he's on our side in 95% of what we believe in and what we're fighting for. So since we have an ally in there, since we know he's on our team, well, then it's our time to get into the street and basically let all the corrupted people know, hey, listen, in the Democratic Party, if you're not going to support his agenda, we're not going to support you, and your career is effectively over. We're going to primary you, we're going to kick you out, and we're not going to feel bad about it for a second if you don't get on board with what we're calling for, which is Medicare for all, free college, a living wage, ending the war, ending the drug war, freeing the nonviolent drug offenders. We have this list of priorities, and we will stop at nothing to get these things implemented. And I think that the model is having an ally in the White House and then having a movement with mobilization that's akin to the civil rights movement, and getting people out there in the streets and letting Washington, D.C. know we're not messing around anymore. And now we have somebody who's on our team, and we are on his team, and we're going to stand in solidarity, and we're going to be united, and we're not going to budge on many of these issues. And you know what? At the end of the day, let's say we only win on 25% of our goals. Do you have any idea how much that improves the lives of so many people?
Yeah.
like millions of people's lives. Even if just think about just having a living wage law in this country where we have a $15 minimum wage and people who work full time can now like afford to live at the bare minimum basic line. Like that alone improves so many lives. It quite literally would cut the suicide rate. Like so many reverberating impacts that are positive. And this is, I'm just talking about if we only win on a handful of our issues.
Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that talking, you know, I keep going back to Obama because I think that was, if you're kind of a certain age and you watched that administration play out, it became kind of like a example of what not to do, and a perfect example of what the liberal technocrat approach is and how it's not adequate. And that's the thing, because Obama he got elected on the back of those massive social movements. And then he got into the White House and he purposely closed it all down and said, no, we're gonna, you know, bottle this. We're going to disband all these organizations that just worked their asses off to get me elected. Now we're in Washington. Now we're going to do the backroom deals and we're going to do the grand bargains. And he just got absolutely rinsed on all levels then, because then he had no movement backing him up. He had no way of like really like, forcing these things through. And, that's the result. He gets rinsed at all levels. The Democratic Party just gets decimated. And then you get president like, game show host, fascist coming in next. And that's not a lot of people seem to have learned enough from that.
With Obama, I think that he genuinely thinks he didn't get rinsed because he actually ended up succeeding on what his ideology really is, which is this kind of like centrist corporatism with a sprinkle of like social change. And so I don't think he views himself as a failure, but of course actual lefties do more or less view him as a failure.
Well, just who's the president? I mean, that's the results. That's the results of the 8 years of that exact strategy, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to quite like take that into account.
The thing that's fascinating about Obama, especially when he ran in 2008, is you go back and you watch like 2007, 2008 debates and stuff in the primary and then the general election. Yeah, it's brutal. Like, he was such a political chameleon because he said just enough to make people on the left think, oh my God, this might be real change coming.
Yeah.
But then there were so many hints that he actually was going to be what he ended up being, which is just a very centrist pro-establishment kind of candidate. So it's really weird because, and I think that what happened with Obama has led many people on the left to be at the point where like, we won't accept anything but a Bernie Sanders-like character. Because with Bernie, there's zero room for, like, you know, vague, flowery language that lets people read into it what they want to read into it. Bernie's just like, here's what I'm in favor of. I support Medicare for all. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So, like, there's no room for, you know, there's no flowery language about how this is the American project and what we need to do is come together, and together if we have a moral value that's above that of like, you know what I mean? Like nonsense, flowery language that makes people feel good, but ultimately he's saying nothing. And Bernie's the antithesis of that. And I think that what ended up happening with Obama kind of scarred a lot of people, and made them totally shut off to the idea of a politician who even has like a 5% bullshitting streak in them.
Yeah. And that's, I think it's why, we are hearing so many rumors about Obama potentially getting involved in this primary. He's kind of tried to laugh it off, I think, through some advisors, but there's plenty of evidence showing that, like, he doesn't think the Bernie approach is the right way. And you can see why is because that proves that his approach was wrong and that his legacy, if Bernie's the next candidate, that's kind of an admission that his approach was the wrong way to do it. And that's why I think he is opposed to Bernie winning. And like I said, he's kind of tried to, suggest that he's kind of he's above that or he's not going to do it. But you can look back to things like during the DNC, leadership race, how they got Perez in there to kind of kneecap, Ellison. So you wouldn't have a Bernie guy in the DNC. And you see that's paying off for them now. You have like Obama's former campaign manager, Jim Messina, going on TV talking about how he's the worst candidate. You have Hillary talking about how no one likes him and he's bad. Like that whole crew is getting out there right now and doing whatever they can to stop it. So the idea that Obama's like, oh no, I'm above it and I'm going to support anyone, is I think not true. I think it's absolutely correct that he's opposed to Bernie and he's subtly trying to influence things.
I think Obama is too chicken shit to be upfront about it. And I think that he's doing exactly what you described, which is handling this in an Obama-like way, which is like, you know, using back channels and sending out people who were part of his administration, and a whole bunch of people in his administration had endorsed Warren like a month ago. So like he's handling this in a very Obama way. But the funny thing is, like, what they don't understand is for people who are populists, and this goes for both the populist right and the populist left, it doesn't matter how many established you use to try to delegitimize Bernie, because
it just makes him more powerful.
Exactly, it makes him more powerful because we know that you're the establishment, and part of his appeal is he's hated by the establishment. So they're in the quicksand-like position where, like, the more they struggle, the more they sink. The more they like get involved and try to oppose him, the worse they do. And that's why you see all these just sad, flailing attempts, whether it's the Elizabeth Warren that Bernie's secretly sexist, or the, oh my God, Joe Rogan, the #1 podcaster in the country, voiced tepid support for you. Oh my God, what a scandal. Like, they have nothing. The tools in their toolbox are counterproductive to what their goals are. And it's so funny. You said this at the beginning of the podcast, but dude, they're just now realizing that he has a chance. Yeah. Bro, he's been one of the top candidates since the day he freaking launched.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. I saw there was that, there's another thing I tweeted about. There was that, like, let me see, I think it was NBC News thing came out yesterday. Yeah. And it says, like, it's about these consultant class people, like, all of a sudden realizing that he's winning. They're looking at the polls and they're realizing that he might actually win in Iowa. They're scrambling. And it starts off saying, like, the greatest trick Bernie Sanders ever played was convincing the world the chance he could win didn't exist. Like, it's this, like, political strategy that he was deploying, and not the fact that, like, this is your job. Like, you're supposed to be good at this. Like, how did you not see this? Like, it's not like he was, like, it wasn't a secret. He's not hiding. Like, this has been out there this whole time, and they just haven't been able to fucking grapple with it, and now it's, like, getting close to the primary, and again, they're not ready for it. They're totally not prepared. They're getting caught with their fucking pants down again for like the fucking second time in 5 years.
I'm so silly because I thought after they were proven objectively incorrect about everything they've ever said with Trump's election, I thought, well, obviously they're going to be more intelligent moving forward. Like, obviously they know that the political rule book that they were using to analyze everything, it's not real. Like, all the things they thought were rules are not rules. Trump broke every rule and he got elected. And then I swear to God, man, it's like they woke up the day after Trump and they were like, let's be equally as wrong as we were about Trump with everything moving forward.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you not see that Bernie taps into the mood of the country at this point in time? Because Bernie is obviously sufficiently anti-Trump across the board in terms of policy, but he also has his own vision that he's selling. And he's this, like, hardcore populist anti-corruption candidate. And he's touching the exact mood of the country at this point in time. And, like, for them not to recognize that until, like, now, it just shows they learned nothing from Trump's election. They learned absolutely nothing.
It is really amazing. I just think it's one of the things when you, like, observe politics and this kind of class of people that work in this world, the fact that, like, you really just have to have no capacity to be embarrassed at all. Like, just the fact that, like, these people are still kind of weighing in, whether people in the media or in politics, as if they have, like, opinions that we should be listening to when they've been so wrong about everything for the longest time. And, like, I don't know about you, but, like, when I'm at a job or something and I do a bad job, I feel like such an asshole, and I go, oh God, I can't even show my face here because I'm so embarrassed. These people just don't have that feeling, it's like,
no, they don't.
They just don't feel that at all.
Their job is to be professionally wrong because they're more in the business of attempting to control the narrative than they are in the business of describing the narrative. See, that's what you and I and everybody with a functioning brain attempts to do, is we attempt to try to explain what's going on and put it into context and talk about it. But these people, as they pretend like they're just describing what's happening, really they're pushing the narrative that they want to be true, which is why, frickin' Nate Silver had in his power rankings had like Beto at number 1 and Kamala at number 2. Yeah. This is a guy who's supposed to be like a political guru who's like on the mountaintop with all the objective data and the numbers. And he was more wrong than anybody. And like, this is what it is. Whatever their own biases and their opinions are, they superimpose that and pretend like it's what the country believes. But really, they're in their own little bubble, totally disconnected from regular people. And they're not describing anything. They're explaining what they wish was the case. And that, again, it goes right back to the Jonathan Chait article of like, see, even though there's ample evidence that the left is massively crushing right now, I'm going to explain how you actually shouldn't believe your lying eyes, and the left is doing bad, and they in fact got wiped out in the midterms. And it's like, you're just wrong about everything you're saying. You're just wrong about everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the kind of like trick about like the neoliberal kind of ideology, right? Is that a lot of these people they don't even think that they have an ideology. They just think that they're calling balls and strikes. They're almost like advancing a very specific ideology without even realizing that they're doing it. Maybe some do, but I think a lot of them really genuinely do think they're like, no, we're just objective. And we just believe in working with the other side and finding this kind of compromise, and that's the inevitable result, without kind of like taking a step back and realizing they're actually advocating for a very specific like political project that's been getting carried out for decades. They're like not able to realize that they're doing that, and they think that they're just, these impartial observers.
It's so crazy that they really think that that's non-ideological, as if the spectrum in the debate happening among U.S. elites, as if that's like a very accurate reflection of the real spectrum that exists in the world with political thought. Like, they really think like the Democratic Party represents a left position and the Republican Party represents a right position, and if I just split the difference and say I'm somewhere in the middle, I'm a centrist, that is like, peak objectivity. And it's like, not only is that not objective, it's kind of comical. It's like a child's attempt to, analyze politics. Why are you assuming that like the left Democratic position is like the left position, full stop, and there's nothing on the spectrum to the left of it? And why are you assuming, like, why the lazy assumption that if you just split the difference and pick the middle of two positions, it is guaranteed to be correct? It's like, no, you can theoretically create a spectrum between like, Ted Kaczynski and John Wayne Gacy and say like, well, I'm in the middle of that one. It's like, well, what? That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly exciting times. It's interesting seeing these people's like conceptions of how the world works and how politics works, like just completely implode in front of their eyes. I gotta say, it's pretty entertaining to see them like realizing now, a week before Iowa, what's happening. But I guess like while I still have you here, I guess that's the last thing we can kind of finish on is that. So we're actually about to get started with this thing. Bernie's really pulling away in these first two states in a number of polls. Obviously people should always take that with a grain of salt. And if Bernie supporters that are in those areas still need to be working twice as hard as if they're losing. But like, it really is starting to look like in the way that it was similar to how the Republicans let Trump get ahead of them and they didn't really know what they were dealing with. It really is looking like a mirror image of that, where the establishment of the candidate has been kind of split between a bunch of people. No one's been able to kind of like take that mantle. The media has tried to like anoint the next, non-Bernie, non-Biden person. They've tried multiple times over the last year. First it was Beto, it was Kamala, it was Warren for a little while, then it was Mayor Pete, and they all get these artificial bumps in polling, and then it just goes back and it fails, and they go, okay, well, who do we have next? And so now we're getting into this primary where it looks like Bernie is probably going to win these first two primaries, looking really good in a number of other early ones. Do you think that's going to, like, is this about to happen? Is Bernie about to actually do this? Like, what do you think's going to happen here?
All right. So first of all, before I say anything, let me just say I've had this weird, like, skittish reaction to even discussing this for the sole reason that, like, I don't want to jinx it and I don't want anybody to get overconfident. Yeah. Because like that absolutely is part of what hurt Hillary in 2016, is this kind of like smug assumption among everybody. Well, obviously she's going to win. Yeah. And it's like, I want to avoid overconfidence as much as humanly possible. So what I tell everybody is pretend like Bernie is 10 points down and go out there and work your butt off. Pretend like we're down in this thing and our back's against the wall and we got to do what we got to do. So that let me just, preface everything I'm going to say with that. But now to get to what you're saying, you are spot on that as of right now, this is mirroring what happened with Trump. The only caveat, though, is our Jeb Bush, Joe Biden, is actually hanging on a lot longer than Jeb Bush did.
Yes.
So we do have one variable, one factor that is a real issue. And the other thing is, Bernie, in my opinion, absolutely has to win at least 3 of the first 4 states to have a chance in this election.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, even though he's doing a great job, he's running a great campaign, and he's busting his butt, and he's doing everything right, Biden really does have a Super Tuesday lead, namely in the South, because older black voters really like Joe Biden, and that shows up in the numbers when you look at Super Tuesday. So basically, I want Bernie to win. I need Bernie to win 3 of the first 4 states or 4 of the first states, and I want him to win those in such a convincing fashion that we start seeing the bandwagon effect, and that Bernie ends up like running away with this. But and other people have said this, and I think it's totally true. In order for Bernie to win, he has to overwin. In the same way that Trump overwon. Yeah. Because the Republican establishment did not want him, and they were just too incompetent to actually stop him. The Democratic establishment successfully rigged the primary in 2016. And so Bernie needs to win in such a crushing fashion that it doesn't get to a second ballot, because they will absolutely try to steal this thing from him if they can at all. So I don't want anybody to get overconfident. I don't want anybody to think like, you know, hey, we could just rest a little bit and see what happens. No, we got to really bust our butts and work as hard as we possibly can, because here's the deal. As of today, as we're talking right now, flip a frickin' coin, dude. It's 50-50 between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders overall, in my mind. I don't think anybody else is really in it anymore. I think Mayor Pete and Elizabeth Warren were hanging on for dear life at the end there. And I think they both kind of fell off, and Yang actually made like a little bit of a surge to kind of replace where Mayor Pete was, but still, every other candidate except Bernie and Biden are kind of out of it right now. So I would flip a coin if it's Bernie or Biden, and I think we need to fight really hard to make this happen, because, Jesus, what an opportunity we have. We don't know when the next opportunity we're going to get is to like really bring about social democratic reform, because there's such a bias against it in the system, and they'll stop it. They'll stop at nothing to stop them. So we have to show up with even more energy on our side.
Yeah, and this is something I will cop to being like totally wrong on this when it comes to Biden, is that I was always saying, like on this show and elsewhere, like once he actually like announces and starts running, those poll numbers are going to really drop, because, you know, he can't talk. He can barely like get out a coherent thought. He's like physically falling apart. He just can't do it. So obviously once he starts, you know, opening his mouth, you know, they're going to talk about his like long history of like touching women inappropriately, which in this era is like a huge, like, obviously it should be a problem in any era, but especially now. I mean, Democrats aren't going to support this guy who's like have a long history of, you know, weirdly touching women and smelling their hair and kissing them and stuff. But it's just that's been one like fucking remarkable thing about this last year, is the fact that like nothing seems to really dent that really high floor that he has. And that's been, I've been completely wrong on this. I can't really explain it.
No. So let me also cop to the exact same thing, plus one more thing. So I actually record of political predictions. Like, I'm one of like a grand total of 3 people who accurately predicted exactly what would happen with the Mueller report, and I've been screaming that fold exactly as it's unfolding right now. So I have a decent record of political predictions. However, 2 things I was dead wrong about. Number 1, the exact same thing that you were wrong about, which as soon as Biden opened his mouth, he would start plummeting pretty quickly. He's hung on for dear life. He hasn't really gained, but he hasn't really gone down that much. In certain states, he's getting crushed, but overall, his support has held relatively steady, which is inconceivable. And the other thing I'll cop to is I genuinely believe that towards the end of this election, it wouldn't be Bernie and Biden, it would be Bernie and Kamala. I thought Kamala would be much more of a political force than she ended up being, because watching her early on, she was doing similar to what Elizabeth Warren did. She was playing the Me Too game with Bernie. Not Me Too as in like the movement Me Too. Me Too as in like, oh yeah, totally, I'm with Bernie. I agree Medicare for all. Oh, totally, I'm on the left, absolutely. And they were actually successfully kind of convincing people that, oh, maybe this person is a viable option to kind of be similar to Bernie, but just younger. And then what happened was...
And ticking all those kind of liberal identity boxes, too, that they like.
Exactly. But what happened was, and I've said this a million times, never underestimate the stupidity of Democratic strategists, because I sincerely believe that in the case of Elizabeth Warren and in the case of Kamala Harris, their staffers got to them and convinced them, stop doing this with Bernie. Bernie has the Bernie lane and you need to pave your own lane. And so they totally messed up their messages, sent mixed signals, and started running to the center. And that's immediately when both of them started plummeting. As soon as they backed off of Medicare for all, as soon as it was clear they were moving to the center, they immediately plummeted. So I thought Kamala Harris was going to be a lot more politically savvy than she ended up being. And so I will cop to being dead wrong about her as well.
Yep. But Overall, I mean, it's gonna be pretty. This next month of discourse, I think, is gonna be absolutely insane. Like, I'm kind of looking forward to it in like a sick way, like a Joker way, because it's just gonna be so horrendous. But you're right. I don't want people to get too comfortable. But, things are looking better than they have in a long time. And that's another thing about the polling. Yeah. The polling is that, like, I think for the last year, like, not everyone fucking pays attention to this shit every day. Like, not everyone has this, like, electoral, like, American politics brain poison that we do, where we're analyzing every single thing as it happens. Most people have, like, jobs and lives, and they're not so entrenched in this like, bullshit every day. And that's the encouraging thing, is that, like, the more it's actually gotten closer to actual votes being cast, that's when Bernie is starting to surge, because people are actually, like, paying attention to who's saying what and what's happening. And hopefully that's a trend that we're going to continue seeing over the next month or two, to get to this nomination.
And I would say to Bernie and his team, and it seems like they recently learned this lesson, is just don't pull a Trump and don't apologize about anything. Just, like, kind of plow forward, ignore all the noise, keep doing what they do best, which is just get out there and focus on the issues that matter to you guys and that Bernie believes in the most. Always talk about Medicare for all and free college and all these wonderful policies, and, like, just ignore all the noise, because I mean, we really live in, like, this political media world bubble, and things that, they were mucking up as a fake scandal, like the Rogan thing, like, nobody was talking about that outside of, like, political Twitter and Washington, D.C. circles. And I think that finally the Bernie campaign made that calculation that, like, what if this is just all noise? And what if it's nonsense? And what if Joe Rogan saying to his, like, 15 million adoring fans, like, I'll probably vote for Bernie. What if we just, like, let everybody know that that's the case and then say nothing about it?
Yeah.
And that ended up being the best possible thing. So, because all they're going to do is hit them with bullshit. So just treat them like the children that they are and just be like, shut up. I don't care what you have to say.
Yeah. Well, this is something I wrote about this in Pace Magazine the other day too. Just when it comes to, like, trying to, like, placate the establishment, it just can't be done. Like, you can't apologize, because it buys you nothing to apologize. You don't get any goodwill. Exactly. You don't get any concessions in return. It's just giving them ammunition that they can then hit you with. So it's just, like, a pointless strategy. And I think you're right that they do seem to be grasping that. And so, like, it's going to be really interesting to see if, like you said, he can, really start to win these early primaries, really pick up momentum, and not get into a position where he can possibly get fucked at the Democratic convention, because that obviously is going to remain a possibility. And, like, I don't think these people even understand what they're going to unleash if there's a sense that Bernie's getting fucked out of this. They complained about Bernie people sitting out of the election last time, but even though statistically that doesn't even really bear a lot of fruit, but people absolutely will, I think, this time, because they see that, like, we got blamed for everything last time, and, we still held our noses and did what you wanted, and we still got blamed for everything. So if there's a sense that Bernie's getting fucked again, I don't think they really understand what that's going to unleash.
If Bernie's a plurality and then doesn't get the nomination. So if Bernie clearly wins, he's out front, but he only has a plurality and he doesn't get the nomination, Trump will win easily, because if they fuck him on the second ballot and they try to pull some sneaky shit, which they will do.
Yeah.
Do you know what Trump will do in that circumstance? He will immediately be politically savvy and pretend to take Bernie's side and be like, oh, the DNC is screwing Bernie Sanders yet again. I can't believe they're doing this. I want all the Bernie Sanders supporters to know that we will not screw you like this if you support the Trump campaign. And of course, Bernie would try to do everything he can to be like, no, this guy's a piece of shit. Don't do it. But Trump will successfully at least make it so people stay home. Bernie supporters would be so immensely pissed that they would stay home anyway.
Well, that's it. I don't think people are going to flip to Trump. I think they're just going to check out of the process and say, fuck you, I'm not going to vote for the Democratic Party now.
Exactly. So, like, and dude, they have no idea. You're so right. They're so up their own ass. They have no idea what they would unleash if they did that.
Yep. Well, it's going to be a pretty crazy next couple of months, and I'm thankful that you were able to come on the show to break this stuff down for me. I'm looking forward to hearing more, seeing and more of your coverage of this as we get into this process. But I appreciate you coming on, man. This is great. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I had a really good time.
Do you want to? We went pretty long there, actually. I appreciate that. Do you want to just plug all your stuff before we log off here?
Sure. People could follow me on Twitter. It's at Kyle Kulinski, and you could check out my YouTube show, which is youtube.com/secular talk.
Great. Well, Kyle, thanks again so much. This was really great. It was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I'll talk to you later, man. Take care.
Thanks, man. You too. Have a good one.